Hey there, welcome back to Business 101, Introduction to Business. And now in this fourth important lecture on the topic of marketing from Chapter 10, we are looking at the core concept of the marketing mix. And in fact, when we consider the very fundamentals of marketing, this is one of the most important concepts. And in this first slide, we talk about three very important aspects of executing marketing strategy that starts with the marketing plan, which the textbook describes as a detailed strategy for focusing marketing efforts on consumers' needs and wants. Now, there are several ways to think about the marketing plan. Perhaps the most useful is realizing while your company may have substantial resources to deploy towards marketing efforts, those resources are never infinite. You have a fixed budget. You have scarce resources. And part of the wisdom of marketing is knowing where to focus those resources and efforts. And of course, what this suggests here, even just this brief description, is you're focusing your efforts on addressing how your product or service meets consumers' needs, fill consumer wants, eases consumers' pain. How do you actually solve problems for potential buyers? From there, you will develop a set of marketing objectives, the middle bullet point, the things that marketing intends to actually accomplish in its marketing plan. Are you looking to increase market share? Are you looking for the buying public to be very conscious that your product is available and what the features and benefits are that you want to emphasize to them? Whatever those objectives are, of course, objectives that you can actually practically measure, those are the things you're trying to accomplish. And there will be a wide variety of possible objectives you're trying to accomplish. However, you have to know what you're aiming for. Now, all of these things will be implemented with experience and hopefully with a high degree of wisdom by a marketing manager, the manager who plans and implements the marketing activities that result in the transfer of products from producer to consumer. In other words, the person who is ultimately responsible for growing and increasing sales. This is a function of marketing. Now, we may be asking ourselves, what's the difference between sales and marketing? And we'll deal with that a little bit later on. Nevertheless, realize the definition that we're brought to from the textbook, the marketing manager is the manager who plans and implements the marketing activities that result in the transfer of products from producer to consumer. So exactly what are the components of the marketing plan? Well, you can see here from this diagram taken from the textbook, the marketing plan should flow naturally from the overall business mission and will then begin to take form with the marketing objectives which are established by management. In other words, what marketing will actually seek to accomplish. From here, a strategy is developed, the things that marketing will actually do to reach each of the target markets using the four primary aspects of the marketing mix: product, price, place, and promotion. Now, these are naturally known as the 4 P's of marketing. And so whenever someone in the future uses the term the 4 P's of marketing or the marketing mix, these are the 4 components that they're referring to. So the marketing mix is comprised of these 4 elements, and a little brief description of each here. Product refers to all the aspects of the good or service or the idea that is being marketed to fill consumers' needs and wants. It may be a spec sheet. It may be features and benefits. It may be all sorts of things about what you're claiming your product or service will accrue to the buyer, what they'll get if they invest in your product or service. All of that is part of product. The second aspect of your marketing mix is pricing, the best price at which to sell a product. And notice there very specifically, it does not mention the highest price or the lowest price. It is the best price at which to sell your product, and this depends on many factors, including, well, exactly who is your targeted demographic. The third aspect of the marketing mix is place or distribution. You get to decide where will buyers find your product and how will you get it there. And then finally, the fourth aspect of the marketing mix, promotion. How will you make buyers aware of your product and what messages will you give them about your product, about what your product's benefits are, about how your product will benefit them, about what they will feel like after they use your product, all those kinds of things, part of the messaging that takes place in promotion. Now, regarding product, you can see here the basic definition, the good, service, or idea that is marketed to fill consumers' needs and wants. And one of the aspects of product that you need to decide upon in your marketing mix is product differentiation. You are trying to create the perception that there is something about your product, some feature or the image that differs enough from existing products to attract attention. How are you better? How are you different? How are you not like the others? And this goes from everything from creating perceived differentiation, for instance, as we mentioned a couple of lectures ago, the difference between a sun-kissed orange and a non-sun-kissed orange, or it can be something a lot more durable, significant, and obvious, like the difference between a Ford F-250 truck and a Toyota Prius. How are you different? And of course, if different, how are you better? Or at least how are you a better choice for a particular buyer than other existing products out there? Many times, this is collected and codified under the umbrella of brand. Brand is a marker or a proxy or a message about the assurance of quality, value, and consistency. Think about that for a moment. All of this is encompassed in brand. And one of the best illustrations of this I can give you, as I keep coming back to this throughout this class, is the whole idea of the McDonald's French fry. It is so consistent from store to store, from country to country, that you can trust, if you're walking into a McDonald's, the French fries are going to be the same French fries you've experienced from your youth. That is the power of brand. Why it is that if you have a hankering over that particular type of French fry, chances are you'll find yourself inside a McDonald's rather than taking a chance on a local burger shop or one of the competitors that are out there, like Five Guys, In-N-Out Burger, burgers from any other type of franchise or store. You know what you're getting. Why? Because that particular brand conveys the assurance of a particular consistency. That's just part of what we're trying to establish as we market and establish the stability of brand in buyers' consciousness. The second P, pricing, the process of determining the best price at which to sell a product, and there's several things to consider. Will your sales price yield profit after covering production costs? Well, of course, that's the first thing, right? The last thing you want to be doing is losing money on every sale. So what is the bare minimum your sale price really can be to cover all your costs, including distribution costs? But then there are other considerations. What message does your price signal to buyers? Not just simply can they afford it, but also does it convey a message by the price itself that this is a product which purports to be a luxury good because it's expensive, because expense automatically makes it exclusive only to those who can afford it? What does it say about having arrived? And what does that then say about you and status and class and all those kinds of things? Or is your price communicating a message of affordability, that it's reasonable, and therefore that why would you pay more? Because if you have certain things you need to accomplish, our product is good enough to do those things. Those, of course, are two significantly different messages which you are signaling to buyers simply by the level of price that you represent to the marketplace. Number 3, place or distribution. As you see here is the textbook definition, the part of the marketing mix concerned with getting products from producers to consumers. Now, several things need to be taken into account as you decide upon your distribution. Who are your target buyers? And where do they often visit? When they're there, what causes them to make a buying decision? What are the most effective ways then to put your product actually in front of your buyers? And how much will it cost to get it there and for it to be there consistently enough for them to recognize it, to know that it's available there, and to find that a convenient way to purchase it? Now, some things to think about. In a world before the internet, when we really were talking about simply retail distribution, then really this whole consideration of place really had to do with what stores did you want to carry your product. It really was a physical aspect of where do your target buyers go to make these buying decisions. Retail store? Where in the retail store? At what eye level? On what shelf? Those were typically the kinds of conversations and considerations we had in place and therefore in distribution. However, now with the advent of buying things online, it becomes a much more nuanced consideration. Which websites? Do we sell through or do we direct ship? How is it we're going to actually put it in front of our buyers? Is it simply virtual? And therefore, how do we get it in front of their eyeballs? All of these are now modern considerations when we talk about distribution. The fourth P in the marketing mix is promotion, the aspect of the mix that concerns with the most effective techniques for communicating information about products. And then the question is, well, what kind of information? What are you trying to message and signal to potential buyers? And of course, nowadays, what you're trying to do is really shape things in terms of a narrative, because people love story and we're hardwired to assimilate and process information best through narrative. How are you using story, even short story, very, very short 30-second stories to convey important messaging and signaling about our product or service? Are we creating a desire? Are we creating an itch that they have to scratch? Are we identifying a deeply held emotional need that needs to be satisfied? These are all the kinds of things that go on in the messaging and therefore the promotion considerations we have with products. Those then are the 4 Ps. Some of the things we have to think about, the difference between advertising and personal selling. There are some products which work best through personal selling. That's where some industries have found really the best, most effective ways to make and leverage buying decisions. There is a reason that to this day, most ways you can find to buy a new car still embrace automobile salespeople. There is a reason why for those kinds of large ticket price items, direct selling is still a durable place of how we do actual promotion. Now, this brings up then the whole aspect of marketing versus sales. And there are some considerations we have. Where should you spend your marketing dollars? Should you spend your marketing dollars by paying a high-paid sales force? Or should you spend your marketing dollars through large, wide marketing campaigns? Now, there's a reason I have these 2 classes of products before you on this slide. Think about energy drinks, the products on the left. They're purchased and consumed relatively often. It's a pretty wide marketplace, everything from tired business executives to millennials who want to stay up and party a little longer, and everybody in between, right? You know it's a pretty wide marketplace of a fairly undifferentiated, well, you're trying to differentiate product, right? But they all come in relatively uniform sizes, uniform availability. And that's the kind of environment where mass market marketing, sending messages to the mass market, is the most effective. Could you imagine how ineffective it would be if one of these energy drink brands tried to create a situation where the only way you could buy one of their energy drinks is if you had direct contact with a salesperson? That would be highly ineffective and a very poor use of marketing dollars. However, on the right, consider not the airline KLM, but consider the engine, the jet engine here that was purchased by Boeing or Airbus to fit onto the airplanes. Jet engines are typically made by a manufacturer, and it's a very specialized, very expensive product that needs to be customized in many ways in order to fit a particular type of an airplane. And therefore, the sales cycle is very long. It requires personal attention to a corporate buyer at an airplane manufacturer like Boeing or Airbus. And typically it's going to require a highly skilled, highly trained, highly knowledgeable sales team in order to finally convince Boeing, perhaps over the length of 2 or 3 years, to use a Rolls-Royce engine versus another manufacturer's engine. And you can see there, in that kind of a product, it probably makes more sense to spend your marketing dollars hiring and employing a highly trained professional sales force rather than a mass marketing kind of a campaign. So this should at least get sort of your thoughts running around the topic of sales versus marketing, and where perhaps more marketing spend is best spent on one or the other. This is certainly a direct consideration of the type of product or service that you're actually bringing to market. And this is one of the last considerations I want you to think of in this lecture in terms of the 4 Ps, the marketing mix. Hope this makes sense. More on this in the textbook, and we'll see you in the next lecture.